For decades, Sharon Osbourne stood fiercely by Ozzy's side, through fame, addiction, chaos, and redemption. Now, at 72, she's finally breaking her silence about the man she loved more deeply than words could ever fully capture. In a voice tinged with sorrow and strength, Sharon opens up about Ozzy's final days, the quiet moments, the haunting last words, and the pain of watching a legend slip away. This isn't just about the death of a rock icon. It's about the end of a love story that survived it all. And for the first time, we hear her truth. Not as a public figure, but as a grieving wife saying goodbye to her soulmate. 1. A lifelong battle in the shadows. Ozzy Osbourne, the gravel-throated icon of heavy metal and lead singer of Black Sabbath, became a symbol of rebellion, fame, and excess. But behind his storied legacy of bat-biting theatrics and thunderous arena shows was a man slowly losing a private war against a debilitating disease. Diagnosed with a Parkinsonian tremor and carrying the PARK2 gene, a mutation known to contribute to early-onset Parkinson's disease, Ozzy's life quietly began to unravel long before the public ever knew. The tremor, subtle at first, began in his hands, visible only under extreme scrutiny. Over time, it grew more severe, transforming everyday moments into constant challenges. But Ozzy, ever the performer, continued to appear in public with the raw energy fans had always known, thanks to the carefully orchestrated work of one woman, his wife, Sharon Osbourne. 2. The Gatekeeper, Sharon Osbourne's hidden war. To the world, Sharon was the blunt, witty television personality, the matriarch of the Osbourne reality TV dynasty, and a powerhouse music manager. But behind the cameras, she was something far more. Ozzy's full-time caregiver, manager, crisis handler, and, in many ways, his lifeline. Sharon had constructed an empire around Ozzy, built on contracts, confidentiality, and crisis control. Every interview, every concert appearance, and every photo was filtered through Sharon's watchful eye. What the world didn't see was the network of medical professionals, legal teams, and financial advisors she had built to ensure Ozzy's survival and the protection of his legacy. In early 2019, after a fall that left him nearly paralyzed, Ozzy's health deteriorated rapidly. The tremors turned to convulsions. Muscle rigidity turned daily routines into hour-long ordeals. His speech slurred, his memory faltered. Despite this, Sharon continued to maintain the image of an unbreakable rock legend, shielding fans from the agony playing out in private. 3. The Final Days, Dignity by Design. In July of the year of his death, Sharon quietly began executing a meticulously detailed plan. She gathered Ozzy's private medical team, legal representatives, and closest confidants. The goal? Prepare for a farewell that would honor Ozzy's legacy while maintaining the secrecy he cherished in his final days. 3 days before his death, Ozzy spoke with each of his children via video call. Though his body had weakened beyond recognition, his eyes, once filled with madness and melody, still carried a fierce glimmer. That final call was less a goodbye than a passing of the torch, a silent acknowledgement that the curtain was falling. On the early morning of July 22nd, Ozzy Osbourne died at home in Buckinghamshire, surrounded by curated stillness. Sharon had ensured everything was ready, from the oxygen machines to the scented oils meant to calm his senses. The room was sterilized but familiar. It held none of the beeping chaos of a hospital, only the quiet breaths of someone ready to leave. The confession heard around the world. Only hours after announcing his death, Sharon Osbourne gave a rare interview that changed everything. With no tears and no theatrics, she uttered the unthinkable. "I felt relieved when Ozzy died." The world froze. Her confession wasn't cruel. It wasn't born of apathy. It was the truth of a woman who had given every cell in her body to keep another person alive. For years, Sharon had slept in chairs, administered medications, supervised physical therapy, and even performed CPR with her bare hands when Ozzy convulsed violently and hit his head. Once, he'd lost consciousness for 17 minutes, and she brought him back by sheer will. Her love had turned into survival instinct. Sharon also admitted to something else: infidelity. "Not because I stopped loving him," she said, "but because I forgot who I was. I needed someone to remind me I was still alive, still a woman." This admission split public opinion. Some condemned her. Others saw her honesty as a brave crack in the impossible expectations of wifehood. Sharon sought no sympathy. She owned her choices, her exhaustion, and her sorrow. "I cried, but afterward I felt light. Not because I didn't love him, but because I had loved him with everything I had." 5. A funeral. Fit for a king. Ozzy's funeral was not public. There was no parade, no media circus. Sharon curated the ceremony herself. It was private, sacred, and steeped in personal symbolism. A team sworn to secrecy transported Ozzy's body to a burial site deep within the English countryside. No celebrities, no fans, only family and trusted staff. The funeral soundtrack? Unreleased music Ozzy recorded after his 2019 accident, never heard by the public. These songs, born in pain but woven with melody, played as a final whisper to those he loved. As the casket was lowered, a special version of "See You on the Other Side" filled the air, a piece Ozzy had selected himself in 2023. At the end, Sharon placed a miniature microphone on the casket, a final symbol. Ozzy had screamed into microphones his whole life. Now one would accompany him into the earth, a silent tribute to a voice that had defied death for decades. 6. The cracks before the collapse. Their love story wasn't perfect. In fact, it had nearly ended years before. When Ozzy's string of affairs was exposed, Sharon was shattered. One of his most notorious relationships was with Michelle Pugh, a hairdresser, whom he had seen for over 4 years. Sharon discovered it through a misfired email. From that moment, trust evaporated. Ozzy was thrown out. Divorce papers were drawn up. Sharon overdosed on pills. "I didn't want to die," she later said. "I just didn't know how to keep living." Ozzy spiraled. Alcohol, drugs, and self-destruction became his punishment. Jack Osbourne once said, "When Dad can't cope, he destroys himself." Eventually, Ozzy admitted he was addicted to sex. Sharon, still hurting, gave him one final chance, but on strict terms. He agreed to therapy, monitoring, and even signed a legal agreement limiting his independence. Every tour, every call, every dollar was monitored. And still, he stayed. Because Sharon, he admitted, was the only person who had ever truly fought for him. 7. The empire Sharon built. From the moment Sharon Osbourne took control of Ozzy's solo career after his departure from Black Sabbath, she transformed his chaos into a global brand. More than a manager, she became the CEO of a multimedia empire built around his volatility. She handled everything: licensing deals, brand partnerships, legal contracts, tour logistics, music rights, royalties, and even crisis PR. When Ozzy stumbled, on stage or in life, Sharon turned disaster into spectacle. A breakdown became tabloid gold. A rehab stint drew public sympathy and boosted visibility. His unpredictability wasn't a liability. It was marketable, and Sharon knew exactly how to spin it. But beneath the media strategy was something more primal. Love. Not soft or sentimental, but desperate, strategic, and sacrificial. She protected him, even from himself. By the later years, Ozzy's performances followed strict protocols. No trembling, no slurred words, no blank expressions. If anything was off, Sharon canceled the show. Behind the scenes, a medical team stood ready. Emergency plans were digitally encrypted, every outcome anticipated. She prepared for worst-case scenarios. In Switzerland, she secured a private medical facility, unaffiliated with any national system, where she held advanced medical power of attorney. That meant no legal red tape, no waiting for consent. If Ozzy collapsed, Sharon had full authority to make immediate life-or-death decisions. Sharon didn't just manage Ozzy. She engineered his survival and extended his stardom. She made a volatile rock god into a sustainable empire, and she did it through a mix of ruthless pragmatism and unwavering consuming devotion. 8. The inheritance of an icon. When Ozzy Osbourne passed, he left behind more than a $220 million estate. He left a carefully crafted legacy. While the fortune was significant, the true value lay in his music, image, and unreleased recordings. At the heart of it all was Sharon, who inherited complete control of the estate. Ozzy had spent years refining his will, updating it annually. It granted Sharon lifetime control over all estate decisions and included explicit instructions for how his legacy should be preserved. A locked vault of unreleased music could not be made public without her direct approval. He also laid out detailed inheritances for his children. Jack received rights to the music catalog. Kelly was tasked with managing media and commercial ventures. And Amy was granted access to private investment trusts, available when she turns 50. Children from his previous marriage were also included with designated provisions. Perhaps the most striking clause in the will was Ozzy's strict ban on the use of his name, music, or likeness in any unauthorized biopics or advertisements. Only the family could approve such projects, creating a legal firewall to protect his brand from posthumous exploitation. After his death, Sharon finalized all affairs and signed off on her obligations. She declined future negotiations or involvement in estate business, not out of bitterness, but from a sense of closure. "I've done my part," she said privately. "Now I get to be Sharon again." Having guided his career for decades, Sharon chose to step away with dignity, leaving the legacy firmly intact and in the hands of those Ozzy trusted most. 9. A love like no other. Ozzy and Sharon Osbourne's marriage was more than a love story. It was a storm weathered together. Their bond was forged in the fires of addiction, betrayal, fame, and fierce loyalty. They were not just husband and wife, but business partners, adversaries, caretakers, and soulmates. Over decades, they built an empire on chaos and creativity, anchored by music and defined by survival. Through the rise and fall of Ozzy's career, Sharon was his fiercest champion and his last line of defense. She managed more than his work. She managed his life, his image, his demons. Their journey wasn't perfect, but it was brutally honest. And when everything else faltered, Sharon remained. By the end, she stood not just beside Ozzy, but above the noise, guarding the legacy of a man who was both myth and husband. When asked how she feels now, Sharon said quietly, "For the first time in a long time, I think of myself." A simple answer from a woman who spent decades fighting for someone else. Ozzy Osbourne didn't leave this world in a blaze of chaos, but with grace. And on his terms. His final goodbye wasn't shouted into the void, but composed with care, written by the only person who truly knew him, Sharon. His music remains eternal. The anthems, the madness, the legend, they all endure. But perhaps the most remarkable creation was the life he lived. Chaotic, beautiful, and unapologetically his. And it was Sharon who held it together, note by note, to the very end. Now her war is over. So is his. And what remains is love, memory, and a legacy shaped not just by the Prince of Darkness, but by the woman who never let him fall.